It is 7 p.m. and I'd like to call the August 3rd, 2023 work session meeting of the Franklin City School Board to order. Thank you all for coming. I will apologize in advance for the board. We've been here since 9 o'clock this morning and some people are kind of out of control. So, do we have a motion to come out of closed session?
I move that the school board have been in closed session pursuant to a proper motion come out of closed session.
Do we have a second?
I second.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Any abstentions? That motion carries. Do we have a motion for certification?
Whereas the Franklin City School Board has convened a closed meeting on this date pursuant to the affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and whereas Section 2.2-3712D of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by this school board that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law, and now therefore be it resolved that the Franklin City School Board hereby certifies that to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted by Virginia law were discussed in the closed meeting to which this certification applies, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor of the motion for certification signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Any abstentions? That motion carries. We have a couple motions, I believe, from closed session. One would be to approve the personnel agenda. One would be to approve the personnel addenda. Do we have a motion?
I move to approve both motions as presented. Both personnel. I can't think, it's been 9 hours.
Does that include the addenda?
Both, yeah. the
Thank
agenda
you.
and the yeah.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries. Do we have a motion to approve our agenda?
I move to approve the agenda as presented.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I second.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries. Superintendent's report. Dr. Carter.
Thank you so much, Chairman Holt. CTE Board Report, Ms. Stratton.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Okay. So as you know, at this point, Dr. Ricks is fully on board with us as our new Director of Pupil Personnel, and part of her role is taking on CTE. That makes me personally very happy to have her with us. I will continue to work with the teams for the data tracking and parts of our CTE that affect accreditation. So we'll be working closely together and along with Mr. Phelps' team at the high school. At this point, the building trades lab is starting to come together. Equipment is coming in, being updated for the new school year, and our application for early childhood was approved in early July, so we'll be moving forward with that for next year. That application process took a lot longer than we anticipated. I think it was 5 months that it took for that application to get approved. The CTE team will continue working together to track the students starting in 9th grade so that by the time they are graduates, we're getting every credit that we can for the CCCRI. And for board members that may not be familiar with that, that's your College Career Civic Readiness Index. And it is a part of our high school's accreditation starting with this year. Ms. Whitley has also come on board as our work-based learning coordinator. She already works at the high school, but she's taken this on as an additional role. And so she will work with our community partners to get our students back out in businesses, sort of maybe prior to what we were doing pre-COVID, but more focused now with hitting the marker for the CCCRI. And our Perkins grant for this year will be focused on building up the early childhood lab and staffing for that for the 24-25 school year. Any questions? No? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Guess I stay for the next one.
Just to handle, yes.
All right, and Mr. Phelps and Dr. Tyndall, if y'all want to join, we're going to kind of do this as a joint venture. As you know, at the end of the year, J.P. King, Mr. Clark was not with us, so I'm going to handle J.P. King's. They're going to speak to their own data, but I want you to remember, this is preliminary data. It can change, it will change. It changed today. It changed Monday. So these are preliminary numbers. We are certainly not saying they're set in stone yet. I'm going to let Mr. Phelps go first because he'll be the high schools.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Again, like Ms. Stratton said, today at 11:41, we got a refresh of our data. Our data is still coming in for Franklin High School, so over in the far right-hand column where you see missing substitute test data and missing summer graduate data, anything that has parentheses around it on the fourth column is not, we aren't finished getting our data yet. So especially, let's start with English. The benchmark for accreditation for English is 75%. In 21-22, minus the 8th graders, we were, and remember all of our data in 21-22 was grades 9 through 12, and then when you look at 22-23, it's grades 8 through 12, so keep that in mind too. English was at 90.9% and at the end of the 2022 school year. Right now we're at 64.4%, but that's going to be 72% once our substitute data is included, our substitute test data, which are our juniors, well, some juniors and seniors that are in English 11, and they take the WorkKeys substitute test to replace their SOL test. So that data is not in there yet. We have had a successful submission of the data, but it hasn't been reflected yet in SSWS, which is where we go in to see a reflection of this spreadsheet that you're looking at right now. Our 3-year average in English is going to be 82%, so we're going to be well over the 75. So that's going to be an area of green for us. And actually, I thought the presentation had we don't have that. Oh, that's the next one. Okay, we'll get to that in a minute. Math, that's a big area of celebration. We've grown by 10 percentage points since last year, from 69.3, which landed us in level 2 last year. We're going to be easily in level 1 because 70% is the benchmark, and we're at 79%. So even if we're off by a point or two, when the final numbers come out, we're going to be well over 70 for math. Science is an area of concern for us. It all comes down to staffing, and honestly, the teacher in the classroom is the most important thing out of every, all of us get up here and talk about data, but the most important factor in all this data is the teacher in the classroom, the instruction that's going on, and that was definitely reflected in science this year. But we're going to use that as our baseline to grow from. We're looking forward to working with Ms. Blick. She's already started working on curriculum updates and some plans that we have in place to improve in that area. We're still down a science teacher even as of today. We don't have a full staff for science, but hopefully that will happen soon where we have all of our teachers for science on board. Chronic absenteeism, the benchmark is 15%. It has to be, and this one you want the number to be as low as possible, not as high as possible. So we're still not at the 15% for level 1, but we did improve by 14 percentage points from 21-22. So that's still an area that we're focused on, but we showed growth, and we'll keep working with that. Graduation and completion index, as of today, we're at 93%, which is up from last year, 86.6%. And we're going to have 2 more graduates this summer. So actually, that's going to be higher than 93%. At least 2. We may have as many as 4. Dropout rate was 12.6% last year at this time. Now we're at 5%. So that's a area of celebration as well. And our CCCRI, even though it's a slight improvement, we did go up from 55% to 57%. Again, we're missing our summer graduate data because those students that graduate this summer will go into that, and maybe we'll be even a little bit higher than 57%. But we need to be at 85%. So even though we've shown an improvement in 5 out of the 7 categories for Franklin High School accreditation, and the 5 would be math, science, chronic absenteeism, graduation and completion index, dropout rate, and CCCRI. We improved in 5 out of 7 areas, and English, because we've been so strong, we're going to make it there anyway. It really comes down to science that really got us this year. That's going to be, and if you go to the next slide, you can see as of today, if the data was, public today, we'd be in the green, which is where we want to be for English. We will be in the green for that. And actually, once our substitute scores get in, the gap groups for English, I predict, will also be green because we're missing quite a few test results there. Math, achievement gap, and overall is green. Science, red. And chronic absenteeism, like I said, we improved from last year, 14 percentage points, but we're not at the benchmark for level 1 or 2. If we could get that 10% growth that the state took away from us, we would be green, but it is what it is. So I think we're not going to be the only ones in that boat this year for chronic absenteeism. Graduation completion index, dropout rate, we're all level 1, that's green, and CCCRI is a work in progress, but we are making progress. So I'm actually, with the exception of science, I can't say that I'm pleased with science, but with the exception of science, we had a year of growth this year. And I think that is a tribute to our students and our team. We're coming off, and this is not meant to be an excuse, but we're coming off of 2 years of learning loss from the schools being shut down from COVID. Online learning was nowhere near the experience of in-person learning, and we realized that was because of the pandemic, but also some decisions were made to be closed even longer than some schools did. And that hurt our students, and we're going to recover from that, but it's not a recovery that happens in 1 year, to be quite honest. And when you're talking about science, our students have been without science teachers, honestly, in some cases since the 5th grade. They went 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade without a licensed science teacher. They came into us last year in 8th grade, and Ms. DeGroff was teaching 6th, 7th, and 8th grade science in the 8th grade classroom because that science test all 3 grade levels. So those are just some things behind these numbers that I think we all need to keep in mind, because you can show growth and still be in the red. You can show regression and still be in the green, like with English. So this is what the public will see, and this is what we are judged on, but it's a lot more to it behind these numbers and these colors. Okay? Any questions for the high school?
Yes.
Okay.
When you say that we're in the red because of 2 years being out of school of COVID, where do you stand come September holding everyone accountable or credible? Where do you stand? How do you feel about it? I'm asking you.
Yeah, we want to be held, our teachers, our administration, our school board, our community, our superintendent, we all need to be held accountable because the education of our students is at stake here. So we welcome accountability, but we also want to understand that there's factors in play that led to some of these numbers. It's not our students' ability, but especially with science, when you don't have a teacher that, if you put me in a science classroom I'm not licensed in science, I'll do the best I can, but it's not like having a licensed teacher. And our students have truly lived that experience since 5th grade. That's why we talk about, retention of teachers and training teachers and keeping them here, because when we don't do things like that, it hurts our results. And, yes, we welcome the accountability, but we want everybody to see the full picture of what we're dealing with.
Thank you.
Anything else?
All right, Ms. Davis, if you'll move on to the middle school. So they started English last year at 65%. This year they did see a decrease to the 61% if you're rounding up. And again, that was an area that was high turnover. I believe they went through 3 English teachers in that position in 6th grade. Math at the middle school, the benchmark being 70%. Last year they were at 58%, and unfortunately this year down to 28%. But we have had, with the superintendent, the new administration, Dr. White, some conversations about how we can do things differently next year, looking at some changes in the schedules, hoping that the changes that we make this year will have a greater impact going forward. Science moved to the high school, so there is no tested science at the middle school. That does also play into what Mr. Feltz is saying. When an area is not tested every year, sometimes it's not taught the same, or the emphasis isn't given to it if it's not tested every year. Chronic absenteeism showed huge improvement, almost 20% improvement in that area. But again, it's not hitting the benchmark at 15%, so there's still room to grow there. And if we can look at their next slide. So based on the way things are right now, their accreditation status last year was accredited, and they will continue to be accredited, even though the results were not as favorable as we would have hoped for them. And you know, new administration across the board, so hopefully things will turn around there. I don't know if you have any questions.
Yes, ma'am. And this goes for all 3 schools. So I forget, will we see, because the SOL is just once a year, right, at the end of the year? Or no? How often? It's twice? Or it's throughout the year? I don't know.
It's throughout the year.
Yeah.
We have 2 big main testing sessions at the end of the first semester and in the second semester.
Oh, okay.
But we also have summer retakes, fall retakes, spring retakes. Seniors get extra opportunities.
And then you have the writing SOL, that's 2
Writings
other
in
different
October and
administrations.
March. One time I counted up that when we did school 180 days, I know we have a different calendar now. And it wasn't all SOL testing, because some of it's industry certification testing, but we tested 90 out of 180 days. Not every student every day, but
Correct.
some type of testing.
Right. Well, so my question based on that then is, I'm hoping that we're not having to wait a whole nother school year before we can compare.
So if you
See,
remember,
I'm hoping we can see improvement, before the end of the year.
so the state started last year with the growth assessments being beginning of the year, middle of the year, and end of year for 3rd through 8th. So we will be able to use those measures from the beginning to the middle to see how our students are doing, and then compare that to the SOL at the end.
Okay.
But that's only for grades 3 through 8, math and reading. Science and history are not a part of that.
Are there ways internally to measure?
We
How
do
we're
benchmark testing, that's quarterly benchmarks.
And at the elementary school, for the lower grade levels, we also use PALS, which is testing their literacy and reading levels. And so we also track that. They test 3 times a year, beginning, middle, and end. And so we take, for our rising students, we look at how they scored now in the spring versus how they scored when we take that fall assessment, to make sure that we're addressing any issues of backslide over the summer, where we're asking some of those students, making sure they're coming to summer school, that they be part of the enrichment program, so that we're not seeing any slip. But then we can see their growth from September to January, and then January until May-ish. So we also have that measure that we can use for the lower ones that don't do the SOL tests.
Right.
And if you're talking about tracking accreditation data, is that what you're mainly focused
Well, just improvement in general, but,
We have a spreadsheet that we, every time we get an SOL result, you know, we even have it going already this year for the summer school students. I can tell you right now, we've already had 24 students pass a history SOL this summer.
okay.
That's not part of accreditation history, but we still track it because it is part of graduation. So we got that, and we track our chronic absence, our attendance data daily
Right.
with a report that comes out every day, and it's pretty in line with what our final numbers ended up being in industry. Yeah, so we do have tracking systems.
Because I know I'll use the absenteeism, because there's been a strong effort over this past year, and I know the board, I know the community is very pleased that's improved greatly, attendance record, and, you know, there's a lot of attention given to that, so that's why I'm hoping we get more frequent updates throughout the year to, you know, I felt, you know, my understanding as a board member, the district's worked really hard to find quality teachers, train teachers, and to create more stability, which is, from my perspective, has been sorely needed in our division. So I feel like a lot of things are finally coming together with that stability. So I'm hoping that, you know, come before December, we'll be able to already see improvements.
At the high school, all of our teachers are coming back except for 3. The problem is 2 out of 3 are science. That's our weakest area.
Right. Okay.
And as of yesterday, we are fully staffed at the elementary school except for 1 teacher assistant. And those are all either fully licensed teachers or provisionally licensed teachers. So right now, we have no long-term subs that will be starting the year with us. And so obviously, we're hoping to retain all of our highly qualified teachers throughout the year. A lot of them are not only highly qualified, but come to us with years of experience in another school division as well. So,
And I'll tell you one thing, because I was a school counselor before I did this job, this is the first time that all of our school counselors are coming back in many years. So I think that's really important, because they know the kids and the histories and the families, so.
and we're fortunate at the elementary school this year that 2 of the 3 of us are coming back. You know, we're very sad that Scotland had to go to middle school, but we're happy for Mr. Clark that he gets her mission also. But it will be nice, especially for me, to finally start the year with the staff and be able to finish the year with the staff. So we're looking forward to being able to really work together and put some of these things up front that we're doing now this summer that will make a difference come September. So.
Mita, did the move of the 8th grade to the high school affect the math score at J.P. King?
No, sir, I don't think it did.
Okay.
Go ahead, Ms. Stratton.
If you're asking my opinion, what affected our math scores was pushing the kids into the advanced classes before they were ready.
Okay.
When you jump a student in 5th grade and put them in 6th grade into math 8, they've lost 6th grade math, they've lost 7th grade math. They're not mature enough for the content, and they've jumped 2 grade levels. And I think eventually, with the learning loss behind the kids, we're not having those advanced groups to push forward like what our schedule was, what we were doing with our schedule. It may have been effective pre-COVID, when we did have larger numbers of advanced kids, but not changing our schedule after COVID with the learning loss, it just compounded the issue over time.
Thank you.
All right.
Good evening, everyone. What's my turn? Okay, sorry. I just wanted to make sure it was ours. So this is the preliminary accreditation information for the elementary school. In English, of course, just like the other schools, the benchmark is 75%. Last year, we were at 62. And this year, unfortunately, we saw a dip to 55, if you're rounding up. And that is a combination of our 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade SOLs, of course. Our 3rd grade reading and 4th grade reading were where we saw the decline. Our 5th grade reading actually stayed right at about the same as far as their individual grade level data. So we are fortunate that this year coming up, we've had the opportunity to hire 2 additional reading specialists. So we will certainly be working closely with them and with Dr. White and to make sure that we're putting all of the teacher training, front-loading the teacher training at the beginning of the year, and then moving so that throughout the year, our reading specialists get about halfway to the year where they're really working more with the students because we've built up what the teachers needed at the beginning of the year. So we have a plan for how to gradually step back from the teacher planning and be working with the students that are in need. We are also fortunate that all 4 of our PALS tutors will be coming back. And if you know, our PALS tutors are all retired, highly qualified teachers. Were in the classroom, forever and ever, and are capable, very capable of helping out our students. We see growth with the students that they work with every year. And they do work with the students K-5. Our math benchmark is 70%. Last year we were at 57. This year we fell to 44. We did see a decrease in all 3 grade levels in math, even, with the average being the decrease as well. The greatest decrease that we had was in our Math 5 class, and we're not making excuses because we know we need to meet the benchmark, but as Mr. Felt said, there are some considerations. Our 5th graders had 4 teachers, I believe, over the course of the year, and all were long-term subs, who, again, did the very best that they could with the support that we gave them, but we expected to see a dip with 5th grade. And so that pulled down the overall score as well. Like I said, we are fully certified. We have all 3 fully certified in math. We have a new 5th grade teacher who's coming in. She has a very strong math background. We have 2 new 4th grade teachers that are coming in that will be teaching math, and they also have a strong math science background. So we know that when we get to even middle of the year, we will have seen growth in how the students are doing. In science is 70%, of course, as well. Last year we were at about 11%, and we did have some of the same considerations that we had to take into account last year's 5th graders. Their 3rd grade year would have been, they had some of the science in 3rd grade, but then their 4th grade year would have been the COVID year, and there was no science teacher in the 4th grade. Last year as 5th graders, they did not have a licensed science teacher either. They went through several long-term subs, and so we are clearly not where we need to be, but to go from that 11% to a 30% this year, we look at it and say, but it's only 30%. That's still really far off the benchmark. And we know that. We worked with Ms. Blick, our science teacher, in the 5th grade. They only test in the 5th grade, but the test covers 4th and 5th grade. In addition, this year, there were new SOLs, and so there was a new test. And so we knew that we were going to see a little bit, because statewide, most of the 5th grade science fell, which we generally see whenever there's a new test. You get a little bit of slip while everybody's getting used to the new SOLs and the new standards. So we were under the impression from the way that the DOE had presented everything to us that we could make R10 in science, and that this would definitely have been more than a 10% reduction in our failure rate. But when we got our preliminary results that you'll see on the next slide, they had us marked as red, as not meeting the benchmark. And when Ms. Stratton asked, we found out that you can only make R10 if you have more than a 50% pass rate. So we were initially excited to see the growth that we had in science, and we're hoping that it was going to be reflected in our report card. So we're celebrating the growth that we have and knowing that we still have a long way to go and some other systems to put in place there. What's not on here because it's not a state accreditation is our Virginia Studies. This year, we transitioned Virginia Studies as a class down to 4th grade, which meant that our 4th grade and 5th grade students took the test. So if you look at last year's only 5th grade students that were taking them, and then if you just look at this year's 5th grade, we had growth there. That's Miss Seaborn that teaches that, and as she continues to teach, just continues to get better and better. What drew our social studies scores down were our 4th grade students that were taking it under a different teacher who was also a set of long-term subs. But we have fully licensed teachers for next year. So we've also moved Miss Seaborn down from 5th grade to 4th since we're no longer teaching the Virginia Studies in 5th, and she's kind of that content expert. She'll be coming down to 4th grade to teach it. So we know that those scores will definitely improve next year once we're looking just at that 1 grade level again. Our chronic absenteeism, still shooting for less than 15%. We did decrease by 20% from 57 to 37, and we accredit that, of course, a lot to Ms. Phillips, and like you said, the work that she's been doing and those kinds of things. I also had the pleasure of meeting with Dr. Ricks yesterday, and she has some other incentives that we're going to be using this year. And we're tying it into our positive behavior system, and so we're going to continue to do what worked last year and then add some more incentives for our chronic absenteeism as well. One of the things that we're doing over this summer during August is having meetings with families and including the parties that need to be there, guidance or Ms. Phillips for attendance and that kind of thing, to talk with the families of students that academically are really far behind so that we can go ahead and put an individual plan in place for those students of what their interventions are going to look like from day one, instead of, because we can use the data from last year, instead of waiting and seeing what their PAL score was this year or seeing what their growth assessment was at the beginning of the year. We can start now with the data that we have and the conversations that we can have with the parents to put those in place. And we're going to do the same thing with our students who are chronically tardy, consistently leave early, and that were our really high flyers for attendance. And go ahead and put an attendance plan in place now and talk to the parents and find out why. Because it's easy for us to sit back and make the assumption, well, you're just not making your kid come to school. But we all know that that's not always the case. It may be a transportation issue. It may be that the parents work and the child's left at home and they just don't get up and get on the bus. So we want to structure the conversations not as a gotcha and we're fussing at you for why aren't you doing this, but we're here to help you. What can we do for you to get the kids into school? What can we do to have them here on time, kind of thing. So can you flip to the next slide for me? So unfortunately, ours doesn't look good at all. We are in the red, as you can see, for all of our markers. We do certainly want to celebrate the chronic absenteeism, and even though we are still in the red, like Mr. Feltz said, you can make significant gain like we did in science and still be in the red. And for a variety of reasons, even though, again, we know that we're not making excuses, we're looking at what we have and taking that and figuring out how to make it better for the next year. So the science that we have in place, we didn't get to a 30% in 1 year. You know, we don't have the lack of the background knowledge and that kind of thing in 1 year. So we know that we're not going to fix it in 1 year, but I feel confident in the teacher that's teaching it and the teacher that had the fourth grade students last year coming up, that we can make 70% in science this year. It's a huge jump, but I think we can do it. And then, of course, we have the things in place for our English, including our gap groups, and then in math for our gap groups as well. Anybody have any questions?
Any questions?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
From my understandings, please correct me if I'm wrong, you have 4 math classes, correct? Or is it, how many are all together? Because from my understanding, you just said you had 4 with long-term subs in them.
No, the fifth grade math class, which is only one, because our fifth grade rotates, and so they have one math, one English. That right. But that one math teacher's class, there were 4 different long-term subs between September and June.
So even the fact that we had 4 long-term subs in this classroom, were they not teaching math or were they teaching economics? I'm just concerned. I'm asking that question because if we have a math class that has a long-term sub, are they not teaching that class that they are long-term sub for? Or are we just sitting someone in there to keep a seat warm?
No, they are teaching the curriculum, and they have support from curriculum specialists, from administrators, but our long-term subs are also not.
Please say it.
They're not qualified teachers. And so you can have someone who is great at math, and they apply to be a long-term sub, and we think, okay, well, they know math, they have a background of something, but there's a big difference between knowing the math and being able to get it across to the kids. Or we have someone who loves the kids and builds the relationships with them and tries to teach the math the best they can, but doesn't have the greatest grasp on the content. And so when you're missing both, you have to have both of those pieces for it to really be successful, and that's where we struggle with the long-term subs, because they're doing the best they can, but they don't, a lot of times they don't have the capability of teaching the content and knowing how to teach that content to the student.
So my question also to you is, as you're seeing this from September to June, when do you bring it to anyone's acknowledgement? June?
No, ma'am. Our job post, anytime we have a long-term sub, the job posting stays up. So it would be possible to start out, say we started out at the beginning of the year and we had 3 long-term subs in positions because we hadn't been able to hire anyone over the summer. We are continuously looking for a licensed teacher. So not this past year, but the year before, we had an opportunity in January to hire a teacher that was just had just graduated from Longwood with his teaching degree. So we removed the long-term sub and put the licensed teacher in January. Okay. So it is we are constantly looking for those highly qualified teachers.
I'm understanding that part. What I'm trying to get is the involvement with you and these teachers. Are these teachers not asking for help? Are they not coming to you? Are you not inquiring that if in fact they do need some type of additional help, or is there anything that, just anything? Because for it to come back in June, and I'm not just saying just math.
All of them.
I'm saying all of them. Even though they're long-term stubs, they're still teachers. Whether they are licensed or not, we're still putting them in here as teachers. So I'm asking blatantly, what is your involvement with these teachers? Are you not asking them, are they okay? Do they need help or any of this? I don't get it. I don't. I'm apologizing to the board because I just don't get it. I don't get how this can happen like this.
So, yes, ma'am, we do provide support. Starting in January when I came back, so I can't speak to the beginning of the year.
Right, but when you say you're starting in January, you only left for 3 months. So you were here in the beginning and then you left for 3 months and then you came back. So obviously this was like this before you left.
No, these teachers were not, these long-term subs were not in place when I left. They were hired because we lost a licensed teacher or because something like that. So the long-term subs that we had this year, with the exception of one, were not with us the year that I spent the majority of the time here. But when I got back in January, one of the things that we instituted was we encumbered the teachers' plannings 2 times a week. One day was for PLC, professional development, training, those kinds of things. And that could have been me, it could have been Miss Fair, it could have been Miss Gatling, just depending on strengths and, because we each have a content strength as well. And we leaned on our curriculum specialists, because if it was something that the curriculum specialist could do a training or had a different resource that maybe we didn't have, they worked with them. And then the other day we worked on the creation of quality lesson plans, meaning their objectives were written correctly, and really digging down into the standard to find out the level of rigor that they were looking for, and making sure that the activities that they were doing were matching that level of rigor, so that when they did take a test, there wasn't a gap there, like, well, we taught it, but it was different vocabulary on the test. Making sure that we worked with the teachers to really dig into the curriculum framework so that they understood all the pieces that needed to be taught and at what level they needed to be taught. So that was once a week, and we met with every teacher in every grade level from K-5 twice a week.
And we still stayed in the red.
Right.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes, well, now that we have fully licensed teachers, right, in these positions, so what additional steps, as administrators, can you take to support our teachers,
So,
in addition to what you've already been doing?
right, so we will continue those meetings. We're also, I know at the elementary school, I don't want to speak for the other schools, but at the elementary school, creating a separate meeting that's just our new teachers. Because we will hit on some of the academic, but we'll also be able to address some of their classroom management, or do they have questions about the resources, or so we'll focus on a PD for them every month when we meet with them, but we'll also have a time that they can ask questions too, because we don't want it to be just them asking, because you don't know what you don't know. So if all we say is, well, ask us if you have any questions, I don't have any questions because I don't know what questions to ask. So that's why we want to make it a combination of, here's what we have for you. We've created new teacher packets that have the handbook, the map, the policy for this, the how you put in time off, where this is located, so that they can kind of have that handbook up front and have it as a go-to. It's goes a little more in depth than just our basic teacher handbook that spells out some of those other things. So we make sure that we're providing resources not only to all of our teachers, but specifically to the new teachers, to make sure that we're building them up and that they do feel that we're supporting them. And if they don't, what do we need to do then to help even more?
So
So at the high school, we have data PLCs every 4.5 weeks, where we look at benchmark data, and we look at the data, but we come out of the meeting with a plan of action. That's one thing we will continue. We review lesson plans and give feedback. We're going to ramp that up even more this year. We use our Fridays for professional development. We really want to focus this year at the high school on classroom management and teaching the entire 110-minute block and not have any downtime. I don't the ones that are struggling, then that's kind of like our plan. Sometimes less is more. Just having a lot of PD on a lot of different things, you might not come out with anything solid at the end. But we need to get back to students being held accountable for their behavior and teachers being held accountable for teaching for the whole 110 minutes of class, and then being held accountable for our data that comes out of all that. We talked about accountability earlier, but also our community, our parents, and our students need to be held accountable. The three principles you got, if we're the only ones being held accountable, then it's not going to work. You can hold us accountable. Everybody, the whole city of Franklin's got to be held accountable.
No.
And we got to be held accountable for when we have lots of turnover in staff. We got to ask the questions, why are these people leaving? We got to look at the exit interviews if they are happening and if the questionnaires are even submitted. We got to look at that data, that's y'all, and see why these people are choosing to leave Franklin, and we've got all these long-term subs. So there's a lot of people that need to be held accountable. And the three principles, what I know about Mr. Clark and us two, I welcome it. Because I like the challenge anyway, and I know our students can do it, but let's all join in the accountability and not play the blame game.
So, I was asking earlier about the grades, which you've already acknowledged, we can get feedback earlier, because, I'm really hoping, like I said, several months after school, we can start seeing growth,
And not to cut you off, but I know I reported on data probably 3 times last school.
Yeah, well, I guess in a way that we can kind of compare to where we're at now
Right.
is more what I was trying to get
All
to.
our science data didn't look good from the
Right,
beginning
right.
to the middle to the end, so it wasn't a shock to me and shouldn't have been a shock to y'all in June because we did report out on that data.
Right. No, my point is I'm hoping that now that we have are more fully staffed with qualified teachers, that now, we've needed stability in our schools. So there's been a lot of effort to establish that. So my hope is that recognizing where we're at now, that in 3-4 months, we're going to see improvements overall. That's what I'm getting to, but the goal along with that, we're not just evaluating the students' progress, but do we evaluate the teachers, and is there a two-way conversation with them, evaluating them and then giving them the support they need to learn how to teach in this specific scenario, for example?
So the teachers division-wide, because it's part of the evaluation system, beginning of the year, the teachers use their either student growth assessment data from the beginning of the year, the PALS, whatever data they have coming in, to form their goals for the year as far as academics for their students. We go over that with them. We make adjustments if we need to. Well, that's not a high enough bar. You've got anything like that. We have those personal conversations with them. Mid-year, we also do a mid-year review and look back at those goals and say, okay, let's look at your data and where do you think you are in getting from where we started to being at the end of the year? Does something need to be adjusted? Do you need another resource? Do you need whatever it is to help get on that? Or because we know some of the resources too, we can offer and say, have you used this? Or based on a number of things. We actually made a chart that had all of the teachers and years of experience, where they knew where they were returning, all that kind of thing, to make sure that we didn't have any grade levels or groups of grade levels that were really heavy on our returning, all highly qualified, all in this one grade, and then have another grade that had all brand new teachers. So we moved some teachers, or a couple of teachers, around, and then as we brought the new people in, we said, you know, this person with their experience and their personality would really work best with this team, because they'll be able to support her in this level, or him in this level. So we did that. And like Mr. Feld said, we're really concentrating this year on using our data, because we have it, the teachers have it, they can print it for you. They can say, this is my benchmark data. But what does the benchmark tell you? What does that tell you? Because I know what it tells me. What does it tell you? And then, like you said, when we come out of those meetings, it's how am I going to change instruction in my classroom based on the results of this common assessment that all of the second grade did, or this benchmark for science, or something like that. So we're really working with the teachers heavily on using their data, and even to the point of the students. So the students will have data notebooks this year that they keep, where they're responsible for when the teacher goes over the test and they write down, and you know, it's a Virginia Studies test, and I didn't do well on the Jamestown section, and so that they're tracking and are accountable for their learning as well.
Right.
I have a question. What are your, so with what you all learned from last year, and then with the results of the testing stuff that we've done over the summer, for this first semester, I'm not going to speak for the whole year coming up, for this first semester for the school, now that we have the teachers, minus the ones that we clearly know about, what are your expectations? What are the expectations that you have now that you have the staffing that are qualified to give these lessons? What are you expecting to see from the first set of exams, like the PALS and everything else, just for this first semester?
So we certainly, the expectation is certainly growth from the beginning of the year to that middle of the year, whether it's a benchmark or a PALS.
I'm going to interrupt you for a minute, I'm sorry, because my question was kind of vague. Growth? Because I want to clarify what I mean when you say growth. That way I'm understanding exactly what you're saying. Are we talking about marginal, or are we trying to do a major push toward what the benchmark is for growth?
Yes.
I'm sorry,
So,
okay.
No, you're fine, because I should have clarified too. What we're talking about is a significant growth. Dr. White is going to assist us, along with our new reading specialists, in taking, for example, in kindergarten, if the expectation is by the end of the year that the students recognize the letter and letter sound of all 26 letters. When they come in at the beginning and they recognize 2. Mid-year, if they recognize 7, that's growth, but it's not acceptable growth.
Correct.
Because if they're going to have 26 by the end of the year, you've got to be moving faster than that. So we're actually going to create a matrix with the teachers, with the reading specialists, with all of our coaches, and say, here's the benchmark for the end of the year. So by first quarter, they should be able to do this. By the second quarter, they should be able to do this. So that then we can identify the kids that need to go to the PALS tutors or need those other interventions right away, instead of, like we said, waiting until the end of the year and then going, oh, well, I mean, we thought he was making growth, but he still only knows 12 letters. So we're instituting smaller benchmarks within the school year. And part of that too is that using that data. So if the students in 4th and 5th grade math take a benchmark at the end of the first 9 weeks, that we look at that and say, hey, this is the material that was supposed to be taught, this was what your lesson plan said you were teaching, this was what the test was on. Explain to me why we have these results. Because all along, we've been checking to make sure that you're teaching it. We were in your room. We're checking your lesson plans. We're being able to dig down in the data and figure out why they're scoring what they're scoring, and then formulating a plan before we leave that room for how are we going to make up for that? Are we reteaching it? Do we need to go back and revise it? Are we using our enrichment Fridays, which we want to grow exponentially for next year? And some of those academic conversations that we're going to have with the families in August are straightforward, and again, not gotcha, but you need this information. This is where your child is. This is the expectation for the grade level or for that they should be on. They've got to come to Enrichment Fridays so that we can provide not only the interventions during the school day, but also on that Friday, which is what it was created for. And that's where those individual intervention plans will come in, because that's our documentation for what we're doing. And that's a progress monitoring piece that we can use to show they started here, after the 2 weeks with PALS, they were here. Again, those incremental
Benchmarks.
So I'll be very specific with what we need to grow on. 8th grade writing, that was our weak area that brought us down from our usual 90% in English. 8th grade writing, biology, and when I say biology, making sure the instruction is aligned to the curriculum, because in that situation, we have a teacher that teaches, but it's not always aligned. So alignment is an expectation for us to grow with. Biology results, 8th grade writing, classroom management / student behavior, setting that expectation from the first day. And when we have to make a tough decision about, how we're going to continue educating with someone, we honestly just need the support all the way down when those calls come in and, somebody's not happy with the decision Mr. Phelps made. And we're going to have to make some examples out of some students to regain the order that we're used to having at Franklin High School. No, we're not trying to suspend students and all that, but we're going to have to do some of that to reestablish some things. And teachers got to handle their own classroom. I mean, everybody's got to set the tone the first day and just keep it going throughout. But that's what we need to grow on. 8th grade writing, biology. We need to grow with our attendance. We need to grow with our holding students accountable. And celebrating the students that are doing what they're supposed to do. I think that's something we all need to grow with from the top down, as far as, when I get someone's complaints about my teacher about something, I need to go hear from the teacher their side and make sure that the whole story is being told. If someone calls down here about something at Franklin High School, get with me, and maybe there's another side of the story, because people will play, against each other if we don't all stay on the same team. So I think we need to grow as a team. I think as a school division, I think we all need to grow as a team. And the team is not us against the students or the parents, it's all of us on the same team.
And we are working to increase the communication with the parents, both from the administrative standpoint and from the teacher standpoint, about academically where the student is. And part of that is we created a matrix to show the teachers when they come back of the students' grade on their report card and their data. And really having a discussion about accuracy of grading. Because just because you like Jenny and she tries really hard in your class, and so you say, well, she tried really hard on this one and she got these 3 right, so we just won't worry about these ones, or, and she ends up with a B in reading, but she's in the 3rd grade and reads on the kindergarten level, you shouldn't have a B. And then when we do report card comments that, yes, especially at the elementary school, we want the parents to hear, your child's a pleasure to have in class, they're very sweet, they're this kind of thing. But included in that also needs to be, these are the interventions that we have put in place, and this is where the student is. And having those meetings quarterly with those parents whose students really aren't making growth, and being able to, at the end of the year, have the documentation of
Any other questions?
I'd
Thank
say
you all.
thank you for answering questions.
Absolutely. If you have questions, let us know.
Thank you.
Mr. Spa? Mr. Spa, is he in the back?
You said Mrs. Bob.
Good evening. A couple of house cleaning items today. As part of our replacement of the Promethean boards with the new panels, which begins very soon, I'm requesting to surplus the old boards that are being taken out of the classroom, and requesting that I've been in contact with our e-waste recycling company, and they're more than willing to take these boards. We really don't have any place to keep them. And they're out of date, not very useful anymore. So I'm requesting the board approve surplusing the approximately 100 old boards that are coming down.
Move to accept his recommendation.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Any abstentions? Motion passes. Thank you, Josh.
Mm-hmm. That one's the one, yep. And then the file at the bottom. No,
Student laptop.
there you go. Yep. Ever since COVID hit, we have waived the $25 laptop fee for laptops that go home with students. It used to be that we would offer this optional in-house insurance program where the parent could pay $25 and it would technically insure the laptop through our school system, which means that if it's broken or requires repair, we charge them $10 and then cover the cost of the repair. If they chose not to pay the $25, we would charge them the full cost of the repair, which would obviously be quite a bit more than $10. We've looked at the numbers, and we get more participation not having the $25 fee, and it really doesn't help us. I mean, it's not a huge budgetary thing. So I'm recommending that we make the waiving of said fee a permanent thing, and so this is basically just the forms that need updating, and the handbook and the documentation that goes along with the student laptop program for your approval that essentially eliminates the $25 fee and treats them all as though they're insured. So a $10 repair fee, et cetera, et cetera. They do still get charged if they lose the device entirely. If it gets stolen and they bring us a police report, we waive that fee, but this just covers the damages to it.
Just to quickly clarify, you were saying that having the fee means that more students don't use their laptops the way they could?
Well, no. When we had the fee, when we charge them any amount of money or the possibility of them having to pay, $100 or something for a cracked screen, makes the parents wary to agree to the program. And in the past, we've let them just, leave the laptop at school or make other alternate arrangements so the parent doesn't have to, accept that responsibility. Doing away with $25, obviously the parent doesn't have to put any money up front, and they're not going to be surprised if the screen cracks or something like that. So yeah, it does drive our participation numbers up.
Do we have a motion?
I approve that we remove the $25 charge on our Chromebooks.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
So the $10 fee would still be charged
If it's damaged.
if it's damaged?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that will be stipulated in the new papers? and
Yes,
everything?
that covers it. It's all
So
covered.
they're going to assume some responsibility
Yes,
for
yeah, and if they lose,
safeguarding the device.
there's certain things like the bag and the charger we consider like a consumable. If they lose that, they do have to pay for replacement, and those are like $20. But the only time they would be out like a significant like $300 charge would be is if they completely just lose the device and have, you know, it's not stolen, they just completely lost it and don't bring it back to us.
Any other discussion?
How much does the Chromebook cost? I'm just curious.
About
$300
$300 is the price point. I mean, they have them in all ranges, but we target $300.
Okay, okay.
There are no more discussions. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Any abstentions? Motion carries.
Every year we get approximately 128,000, sometimes a little bit more, money from the state VPSA SOL technology grant. This has been going on for as long as I've been in technology, so it's pretty much, you know, an automatic thing at this point. But they do require that the school board adopt a resolution saying that we're going to accept said funds on a yearly basis, and so this is that resolution.
Do we have a motion?
I'm sorry, can you, my glasses broke tonight. Can you summarize this again? What is this?
It basically says this: we, the school board, let's see, declares the division's intent to, the way, I don't know, I'm not a finance guy, but the way it is you have to declare your intent to reimburse the division with the proceeds that come from the state for technology purchases.
I move to accept this reimbursement resolution.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Any abstentions? Motion carries.
That's all for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you, Mr. Spa. Dr. Walters?
Good evening, board members. I'm here this evening to share with you a grant opportunity that VDOE has presented across the state for stronger connections. So we've talked a lot about how important our instruction is. And I would say even more important than that is our responsibility to keep our children and our employees safe. And this opportunity is going to help us do just that. So the state has solicited grants to help bolster security efforts in school systems, and they're using criteria that is pretty explicitly spelled out. They're looking for the number of incidents of early warning indicators of school violence, so some very specific things that our administrators report in our student information system when incidents occur. It's also looking at our chronic absence rate, which we've already discussed this evening, our school division's student-to-staff ratio of counselors, school psychologists, and social workers, and also the division's participation in Title V, which is our rural education for small school divisions. So when you look at those criteria, that the matrix is set for either 1, 3, 5, or 15 points, depending on which criteria we meet. Ms. Davis, if you'll go back to the previous slide. So for the number of incidents of early warning indicators, that could include assaults, arson, some very, very specific behaviors. As we've already discussed this evening, chronic absence, that gives us 5 points based on where we are with our chronic absenteeism. And our participation in Title V, chronic absence and participation in Title V give us 20 points. And that is halfway to the mark that VDOE has established as a high needs school. Now, based on my analysis of the data that we have, and again, it's preliminary data, I believe we're going to hit that mark of 40 points. So we should have a pretty good chance of receiving this grant funding. So what it is that we're proposing to do, we're proposing to ask for $227,000 from VDOE that will support the employment of 3 school security officers. That will be 1 dedicated to each of our schools, along with salary and benefits. We want to make sure that we are training our school security officers through the Department of Criminal Justice Services. So we've set aside some additional training and travel funding. We're also looking to increase the number of handheld metal detectors. Mr. Spa does a fantastic job of utilizing other funding for those walk-through scanners that we have at the high school and the middle school, and I believe he has solicited additional scanners in other grant opportunities. So this evening, I'm requesting permission to submit this grant to VDOE in the amount of $227,000, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
I just wanted to make a comment that I am very excited to see this. I think this is excellent.
We really appreciate, we can't say enough about our SRO, and we appreciate the city taking care of the cost of that SRO. But there are some obstacles that we have to work through, and so we want to make sure that we have some dedicated staff to help ensure the safety and the security of each of our schools. And so I think this is an excellent opportunity for us to just help get some extra support in the buildings.
Yeah.
Would this be a year-by-year grant?
So the way that the grant is written right now, it would just cover this upcoming year, so fiscal year 24. And so we could have some discussion with finance, with Dr. Carter, about whether we would need to bring that on to the general fund, or I'll continue to look into grant opportunities that would help sustain that. But this grant right now is just for this upcoming school year.
Do you have anybody in mind to hire if we get the grant?
I don't, but there are several divisions around us that are going through this exact process. And so we want to make sure that the person that we're hiring has a very good understanding of what it is that we need for them to do. It can be very easy to get into the weeds with this. We want to make sure that this individual is understanding of the legal implications of the role, and also to understand how to avoid some pitfalls that might come with that. We want to make sure that the buildings are secured, so that's going to be one of the first things that they do, and one of the continuous things that they do. They're going to make sure that the doors are latched properly. They're going to be responsible for helping sign in people, manning some of the security systems that we do have in our buildings. So we're open to anyone who is interested, and I'll be working with the HR team to establish that job description and expectations.
Would this eliminate the position of our current SRO? Or?
Absolutely
No.
not. I would not recommend that. This is to supplement what the city has already provided us.
Okay.
Because Officer Martinez, like I said, is great, has done a fantastic job building relationships with our kids. So we definitely want to continue that. This is in addition to what the city is already doing. And that was actually one of the stipulations of the grant. So if we had dedicated SROs at each of our schools, we couldn't use this grant funding to fund another SRO position. They want to make sure that to the extent possible, each school gets something. So.
Yeah, Martinez has to move between all 3 schools. I mean,
Correct.
she's doing an incredible job. But
Yes, ma'am.
just having this, it means that each school has their own dedicated person. So I think it's a great idea. I hope we do get the grant.
Thank you.
Oh, I move to accept this grant proposal.
We have a second.
I second.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Walton.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Ricks.
identification view, it's there, but for whatever reason, it's not showing on this view. I just checked.
If you go the other route, because I saw you playing with it, are you still able to show it to the screen?
Because I might expose something that, that because it's got a lot of lot, I don't want to make a mistake and, something that may show something that I'm
Okay.
not supposed to.
Okay,
And plus,
okay.
I can't legally do it.
Okay, we'll do the best we can.
Okay.
Go ahead, Dr. Riggs.
All right. Good evening. Today, I'm bringing before you the dress code number 1. It is the presentation that's there, and I'm just going to highlight some key information from the presentation. There was a survey conducted with the parents in reference to the dress code, not the dress code, the uniform dress code. And the survey resulted that 70%, well, 155 parents actually participated in the survey that we just released. And out of the 155, 70% expressed their concerns with some of the opportunities to purchase different parts of the clothing items. Also, some struggles with working with administrating teams, administrators calling out the parents with different tasks with the uniform policy, and also just overall some concerns with just managing the dress code with the uniform period. So what I've done was meet with all the administrators. We sat down with feedback from parents, feedback from the community, and what we did was establish pretty much a standard dress code pre-K through 12, and that should be, I don't know if they have the printed, do they have the printed document? Okay. So in that dress code, we have a standard dress code, and pretty much what we went through is several different categories. We went through the shirts, and we outlined specifically looking at the current trend, looking at information from the uniform dress code, and also we established like the general dress code for shirts. We separated each category: pants, shorts and skirts, socks and shoes, outerwear, accessories, others, and also the physical education uniform requirements. So pretty much the high school.
I can show it in this view. Can you see that?
Okay, yes, I can see it. We pretty much used the high school standard policy and kind of modified it for a pre-K through 12 policy. All right. So here was go back to history and concerns. Put that. Okay. History. The next one.
That will be the first one.
Down.
Okay. So here, if you can just glance at some of the historical and concerns, the uniform policy was previously modified to include jeans and any, pretty much colored tennis shoe. Students currently in 8th grade, now they followed a standard dress code policy because they at the high school. Uniforms are limited in the local clothing store. We used to have a host of uniforms in Bell, Roses, and also Walmart, and those things are limited at this time. And as I was saying before, administrators spend a host of time, just correcting uniform violations, and that time can be used to service students, in other areas. Next slide. Okay, so benefits of moving from the uniform policy to a more standard dress code policy for grades pre-K and 8. As we see the rises of mental health, and this was all research-based as well, including social and emotional challenges that our students face, having the opportunity to express themselves in an appropriate manner with the appropriate clothes. Also, according to our current discipline data, we don't necessarily see that uniforms have reduced any peer oppression or bullying or attendance challenges that we currently have. Research state that uniforms do not necessarily improve attendance or preparing students academically or preparing them for success on exams. Also, parents will be provided more clothing opportunities with a standard dress code policy. But also, with us really screening that standard dress code policy, we went through it as an administrative team, sat down, worked through it collaboratively if, administrator couldn't be there at the time, and we really screened it to make sure that it was appropriate for pre-K through 12.
So at this point, board, what I am recommending is to suspend the current dress code that we have at the elementary school and middle school to reevaluate it for 1 year, and to adopt the model from the high school for this year, because it's one or two things. It's either have everything you need for a true dress code, nothing watered down, and going into the gray areas and causing the administrator a great amount of time and headache trying to manage and even interpret, and the teachers are trying to interpret as well. Or go to the Franklin High School model for 1 year so we can alleviate that headache, come back, take a look at our current dress code, revise it, find out what we actually have options in the city to buy. And so that has been a great challenge to our administrators, has been a great challenge to our parents. That's why I also had Dr. Ricks send out a survey to parents to get a random sample or a snapshot to see how they feel. So my recommendation at this point for the board, if you approve, is to suspend the dress code at the elementary and middle school level for 1 year. Let us reevaluate and reassess what we have, and then we'll revisit this time next year.
Do we have a motion to accept the superintendent's recommendation?
I so move.
Second.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay, the next thing for me tonight is the code of conduct. Of course, the purpose of the code of conduct, we want to ensure that our schools remain safe or in an order fashion, and also support the be very supportive of the environment in the teaching and learning process. We also want to continue to encourage teaching, guiding, directing, and providing opportunities for new learning. And also our goal is to give our students opportunities and choices in making better decisions as it pertains to behavior. We do have a host of students that constantly, and when we look at the data in terms of discipline, disorderly conduct, so we would definitely want to look at, continue to look at strategies to support them along that journey. Next. Okay, so recommendations for revision or updates. Again, I sat down with the administrators and we kind of went through the code of conduct. This is an annual procedure that we take in looking at the code of conduct, and also recommending any changes based on VDOE guidelines as well. So one of the things we noticed that we wanted to add was also giving parents more notice as it pertains to students being absent and tardy. So on page 2 and 3 of the new code of conduct, we added warning letters for unexcused absences. We also added truancy officers to the attendance review team specifically so that parents can be able to see that information. And also, as you heard about the high school having those 10 days, per semester, unexcused absences, we want to be able to make sure that parents understand that and be able to have that in writing, that 10 unexcused absences, 10 added for the high school, 10 days absent per semester is a truancy concern, instead of just having 20 days as a whole, because we have those semesters split. Also, guidelines for student dress code, revisions to the standard dress code policy, that had to be updated in the code of conduct since that was approved. So that new policy has been added here. And also levels of intervention and response, that's another section where we looked at the discipline responses there, and we want to add a threat assessment to that 4th category for level 4. Bullying, at first bullying was some concerns that came up from legislation as well. We added a reporting bullying hotline, which was bullying when parents, students want to call in with bullying cases and may not want to release their name and information, but want to give us details of what happened. We have up to 24 hours to respond. So we changed that in our code of conduct from having 5 days to respond, and also for school administrators have to respond within 24 hours of those parents' concerns or notifying the parents of the bullying situation. Guidelines for student dress code, again, we revised that policy there on those pages. and levels of interventions and responses. We added that threat to that page section as well. And that's just a copy there. Any questions about the revisions to the dress code?
Who answers the bullying hotline?
We have Ms. Boone Johnson answers the bullying hotline just to get the information. Then she directly reported to me, and then I handle it within 24 hours.
Okay.
And that hotline is 24 hours a day?
No, the hotline is not 24 hours a day. It's just a set time.
What are the times?
The time for reporting will be the office times when we're in the office, so that'll be from 8:30 to 4:30. But it's still within a 24-hour range that they can report. That's what we currently have in place at this time.
So I'm asking the board to make a recommendation to approve the changes on the student code of conduct as Dr. Ricks has presented.
I so move. I so move.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Any abstentions? That motion carries.
Okay, and my final thing for tonight, policy proposal regarding transgender and gender nonconforming students. This particular presentation, go to the next slide, is a first read. So the VDOE has released model policies that they are encouraging school boards and the divisions overall to really look into and be able to streamline those policies and to come up with, a policy that will support our school division. So each school board shall adopt a policy, and you can see the code there that ensures the privacy, dignity, and respect of all students and parents in Virginia public schools, and specifically targeting a policy regarding transgender and gender non-conforming students. So right here, pretty much in your documentation, you see in this first read, you will go through a set of definitions. So we really try to have this like a simplified document, not to be too, deep into it, but just really to just simplify the definitions here as it pertains and relates to cisgender and going on to gender expression, transgender, and gender non-conforming. So it actually outlines what those terms mean. Okay, the next section pretty much is the guidance section in this proposed policy, which also kind of outlines official records, names, specific gender segregation activities, and student information systems. For an example, one of the things that came out, I'll just say one thing about it as you read through it, is the students, if they identify themselves as a certain way, wanting to be called a certain name without the parent. That's some things that we have, talking with the administrative team, have had those challenges with this year if they want to be called a specific name. So there are guidelines as you look under the name category that says how you can specifically address that. So it gives options for that. Again, it's not a guarantee. It was a multiple policies that I read through, but I tried to really narrow it down where it would be appropriate for all of our students and ensure dignity and safety, and also just to kind of work through those guidelines with that. The next section of guidance deal with restroom accessibility, locker room accessibility, athletic programs and activities, dress code, and discrimination and harassment kind of clauses with that. So again, this is a first read for you to read through it, have any questions or comments, and we can kind of work through it as a team to ensure, the dignity, respect of all our students and staff here. And it's linked there to the presentation, the proposed first read policy for that.
So we can go through to that link to get the actual verbiage then?
Yes, and we'll circle back around next board meeting.
So is that link, this is the recommendation from the state,
Yes.
VDOE?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, the state released like multiple policies.
Yeah.
And they wanted us to pretty much streamline And so what I've done was pull from all of the model policies that they gave us and kind of narrow it down where it's pretty much simplified and kind of can relate to our culture and still be respectful and, you know,
And that's
dignity
what's
for
at
all.
this link.
That's what's in that link,
okay.
is what I'm proposing that we put in place for a policy.
Okay, so,
Once we get to that phase, right now it's just, you know, going through
It's
and
first
reading and
read.
having more discussion.
so
if necessary.
if this is the first read, then, I mean, we'll have, how soon do we have to adopt this?
We'll probably have it next meeting on the 20th.
So what if we have questions and discussion?
Is there a deadline that we have to meet?
No.
No, there's no deadline, but, you know, the school year is approaching, so that's why we're bringing it to you now.
We could pass this as a first reading, and at our second reading, get the detailed policy. Is
We
that
can't
what-
pull it up and read it right now, though, so I'd prefer not to vote on anything yet today, but just have a chance to review it.
Which is the first read, and that's the option to be able to do that, to go through and review it.
So there's nothing to do right now. It's just an introduction, and please take a look, and we'll be discussing.
As
Thank
I
you, Doc.
understand it, the state passed the law, which you quoted,
Yes.
and then VDOE and VSBA try to write a policy to conform to the state law.
Yes.
And the issue with a lot of school boards is that policy what they want, and does it in fact conform with the law? So this is a first reading, so we're not obligated for the long term. Do we have a motion from the board?
Is there a motion required or requested?
That was my questions. I was going to say there's no motion needed.
We have a motion and a second to have a first reading. Maybe we don't.
I don't think we need a motion.
No,
All right,
no.
we'll consider this first reading and vote on it for a second reading.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry.
Ms. Morrison.
Good evening. I have three quick things to talk about tonight. One is the group health insurance renewal. We normally have Pierce Group brokerage firm elicit proposals from various insurers, but last year we had a 2-year contract that we signed with Optima Health. So the Optima renewal rates came in at 2.8% lower than fiscal year 23, and the plan runs October 1st through September 30th, so we will have open enrollment near the end of August. These are the rates. I know you can't see that, but for example, if I was employee and spouse, I'm currently paying $531.05 a month, and the new rate would be $515 a month for me. So it would save approximately $20 to $30, you know, for each employee.
That's a first.
Yeah, I requested it personally. Questions? Okay, the next thing I wanted to talk about was the school nutrition rates have been published, and these are the rates that would get reimbursed for low and no-cost lunches and breakfast. And your rates that we charge for adult meals have to be these rates or greater. The new rates for the upcoming school year are, next slide please. They have gone down, and we're continuing to charge $3 for breakfast and $5 for lunch. Questions? Okay. And lastly, I have a proposed budget amendment. This is a memo proposing the budget amendments required to roll over the grant funds from fiscal year '23 that are left into fiscal year '24. And this will match the city's records. The city's aware that this might be coming. So it's basically increasing our grant funds by the rollover amount of $5.8 million. And I recommend that the board move to approve this budget amendment.
I move to approve the budget amendment as presented.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Phelps, do you want to speak to the course offerings? Yes, sir. Go ahead. While you're here,
Okay, without going through the whole document, we have updated the 2023-24 course offering guide, and basically the changes or the additions are all of our 8th grade classes, which are now in the course offering guide since the 8th graders are at the high school. Also, all the dual enrollment classes that students can take through our partnership with Tabwater Community College and Camp Community College. And everything else was just updating administrators' names, guidance department, making sure the table of contents match the page number, just housekeeping stuff like that. So if you want to look at a particular page, I will, but it's an update from last year's course offering guide. What's your pleasure? Do you want to go through it page by page, or
No.
Okay, I didn't think so. I didn't want to disappoint you if I said. Okay.
You
Are there
can
any
go
questions?
by page, but we-
I have been through it. Trust me, page by page. And the changes are the 8th grade classes, and the dual enrollment classes that we now offer, in addition to what we offered before.
so I'm requesting the board to approve the proposed course guide that Mr. Phelps has proposed to the board.
I so move.
Second. We have a second and a motion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Phelps.
Okay, these are our proposed fees for 2023-24. Nothing changed from last year. No increases, no additional fees. Just normally at this meeting in August, we get them approved to go to the next school year. If you want me to explain what the fees are used for, I will, but nothing's changed.
That's okay.
All right.
Do we have a motion to approve the fees for 2023-24?
I so move.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you, Travis.
Make sure I'm not next to you.
All right. I think that concludes the superintendent's report. Thank you, board.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Carter. Last item is a suggested committee assignment for board members. I sent those out a few days ago. Any comments?
For the strategic plan, can you add Jerry and myself to that?
Add what?
Jerry
Strategic planning?
to the strategic plan.
Yes, we determined that today. Brittany and Jerry will be our strategic plan representatives. Thank you for that. Is the board willing to accept the assignment?
Do you need to vote one by one?
No.
I move to accept these suggested committee assignments. Are we doing this by motion, or what? What's
Yes,
In second.
Okay.
we have a motion and a second. We have one correction that Brittany brought up.
Oh, I move to approve the amendment.
All right. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. That motion carries. Thank you all. Board, do we have any other comments before we adjourn?
I do. We've been, as mentioned earlier, we've been in training all day, the board with the superintendent, and a couple others in the central office. So it's been a long day. I'm very optimistic, looking forward to this new year. You know, it was mentioned earlier that we all need to be held accountable, and I believe this board, I believe we're starting with ourselves, that we're holding ourselves accountable, and that we went through that today, and working with the superintendent. And so we ask ourselves hard questions, and that's why we ask our central office, our superintendent, our administrators, difficult questions as well. And it was also mentioned we need the community support. And that is something I've mentioned, others have mentioned, that I keep encouraging parents, please get involved. Because you do have a city, a lot in the city, a lot of people in the city that are very supportive of our schools, of our students. Our school board is, our central office is, our staff is, and but we can only do so much. Parents and the families are really key for our community. So we just keep encouraging, and I'm sure I'll bring that up again throughout the year. But thank you for everything everyone does, and I do hope that as we work through the beginning of this year, that we do develop a common vision that our schools will be top in the state.
And I just want to add that, as we discussed today, the message to me was very clear that, and not trying to speak for the board, but that we have great confidence in the students in this division and of their ability and potential to achieve whatever we are able to give them the opportunity to achieve. So, you know, as much as we're asking our hard questions and we're holding everybody accountable, we have great faith in our students. Just want to make sure that's very clear.
You'll hear more about a strategic plan. We spent an hour on that today. That's going to be a huge effort by the entire community. So we're excited about that. So we don't look like it, but we're kind of pumped up here.
It has been a good day.
It was a really good day.
It's a good day.
Anything else?
And thank you to Dr. Carter and everybody that's working so hard. There's a lot of work. There's a lot of work that's going on in our division, and we definitely don't want to ever make it sound like we don't appreciate it.
Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I moved it.
Second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.